Hi guys, Dave Pinson here, Philippine Bible Ministry. So I just have a sort of a news flash for you. If you open this then maybe just keep an open mind, please. I do not believe we're in the last days. We're probably not in the last days. Now that goes against everything I was taught for over 20 years when I became a Christian. Um, so what is this about? So I'm not going to go into all the details about dispensationalism versus what's called preterism or partial preterism, futurism versus different ways to look at it in times. But I'll just tell you a couple of things first, and then I'll get into it. Just some background. First of all, this is not an essential doctrine in a way, but in a way it is essential, I think, to how one walks in following Jesus. So I think it's become more essential the longer I chew on this. That's why it's time to do the video. Now, please keep an open mind, keep an open heart. Be flexible on things that aren't, in other words, it's not essential to your salvation. Whatever you believe about the end times has nothing to do with what's real necessarily. Because if I'm wrong or you're wrong, it's not going to change it. In other words, if there is a pre-trib rapture and a coming trib and all that stuff that a lot of people believe, then I'm still in the boat. It's not like God says, well, you don't believe the right way about the rapture, so you're out. No, because I'm a follower of Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I love the Lord. I have the Holy Spirit indwelling me. I pray, prayerfully seek Him every day. I follow, I have fellowship. I'm doing all those things that a Christian does, right? So it's not going to throw you out of the boat if you don't believe in me. So just please listen to me for a second. This might affect the way you see the world, and it might affect your ability to follow the Lord. So that's why I say that. Now I believe it's essential. So for years, I grew up in a dispensational way. I was taught that. I came through Calvary Chapel, which is really huge on end times, eschatologies, end times, the coming, rapture and all that stuff. I didn't really know of another way. I was never taught another way. They were never really good about teaching us the history of the church. They were only to teach us what we knew. And I'll just tell you this: the whole idea of dispensationalism came out, all of it came out really, but a guy named John Nelson Darby. I'm working on a book one day about the 19th century. I say one day because hopefully I will publish it and it won't just be something I talk about. I have a lot of notes and everything. I just haven't had the unction to get up and do it. So he came out with this idea. And here's the thing: I'm not going to get into the whole depth of it, but I'm going to tell you this. There's a lot of other ideas out there that existed long before the 19th century about the end times. Matter of fact, if you're reformed or you're from that tradition, you already have a different, you're more closer in line with mine. But I would tell you this: I ran upon some stuff. I never really settled it in my heart that I was totally in agreement with everything they were saying. Didn't make sense to me. Whenever I read the Revelation, I'm like, well, it doesn't really say what you're saying. It says I don't understand why you say this. And I'll just say this: Steve Gregg. If you want to look up somebody, I'll give you two sources, and then we'll move on. Hopefully, this is just a precursor to what I really want to talk about, which is really almost separate. Just something to keep an open mind, open heart. Steve Gregg is my favorite living Bible teacher. I agree with almost everything he says. He wrote a book on hell that I don't agree with stuff in that book, but other than that, everything else, I'm 100%. He does a lot of stuff about end times, eschatology, all kinds of stuff. And so, if you want to look up a source, look up his response to Jack Hibbs, for example. Look up that video and just watch it. Just keep an open mind and watch it. And then there's a book by Hank Hanegraaff called The Apocalypse Code. Excellent book, also. But I will say this, and then I'll move on. Just to keep an open mind, keep an open heart. Think about maybe everything you've been taught is not. Maybe that's not what the Bible really says. Maybe we all got caught up in this. So, because what happened with the Nelson Darby thing is it became prevalent. It kind of blew up, and it became very, very popular. They actually started the Dallas Theological Seminary to push this doctrine out, right? To teach everyone about this. Is it the end times? Everything that I was taught, that most of you believe, if you're evangelical Christian, most of you believe it, and that's fine. Except I want you to think about something for a minute. And you watch all that stuff, fine, do what you want with it. Just let it go. But can we just put it on a shelf for a minute? When I say put it on a shelf, I mean, let's just take all that stuff that we believe about the end times and all that stuff, and let's just set it over here and just give me what's called a caveat. Let's pretend that the dispensationalism is not true, right? Or let's just look at it this way. This is what I want to talk about. Why do I say I don't think we're in the end times? Well, this is in my. You'll hear me talk about this a lot. This is in the sermon that I just posted, but I just felt like I wanted to go into it a little deeper. So one thing I saw when I was looking up the because I'm what you call partial preterist. I know that's a big word. That's a big Bible word. And I looked it up in my what's it called, Google AI search bot or whatever that is. It's AI that gives you those answers just like that. Actually, sometimes it has some pretty good stuff. Sometimes not. But this was a good one. It said people that believe like I believe, they actually use grammar and logic to explain the Bible. And I thought, yeah, we use grammar and logic. That's why it says, when it says last days, and like I said before, if you look it up in the scripture, in the New Testament, you look up the phrase last days, you'll find 5 instances. 4 of them are referring to what happened right then in the first century. The fifth one could have been that, it could have also been a future thing, right? But 4 of them, for sure, are about the first century was called the last days, right? So grammatically speaking, when they said we were in the last days, we assume that days doesn't mean hundreds of years. It looks like it means a generation. Jesus said, "This generation shall not pass away." Now I know my dispensational friends have twisted that up and turned it and said, "Well, that means when the Israels return, that generation." But that's not what it says. He's talking to people there. Just listen to me for a second. Grammatically, who is he talking to? He's talking to the people that are standing right in front of him. Yes or no? Yes. That's why I love the grammar part, because words mean stuff, right? So he's talking to those people. So he goes, "This generation." He's talking to those people right there. We don't have to. So here's the thing that people say: the dispensation. Well, we believe in, we always take the Bible strictly in what it means. We take the Bible, we interpret the Bible literally. I say, okay, then literally, he's talking to people literally right there. And then so, no, we don't do it when we don't want to. When we want to, we take it spiritually. Well, he really means this and that and the other. By the way, it's been more than 40 years. It's been many, many years since Israel became a nation, since the tree returned, as you believe. Luckily, about 100 years after that happened, hopefully people will fall off of that, unless the Lord comes back first. But anyway, so here's the thing Steve Gregg said about that too. I know I still haven't got into the crux of it, but I will in a minute. It won't take that long. He says, when you look at all the reason that all of the Bibles that teach dispensationalism, the reason that they have commentary, what do they call those commentary Bibles, is because if you just read it, you would never understood what they say it means. They have to go in and explain it to you. Well, we take a piece of Daniel here, and when it says 3.5, it really means 7, and this means that, and they actually, you need someone to explain it to you in a way that makes sense to them, so that you have an understanding. No one just try reading through like Matthew 24, reading to Revolution without that thought in your mind. See, well, what does it really say? And no one reading that can really assume, like, well, the letters to the churches. Those are letters to actual churches. So you just say, well, no, this is the different ages and blah blah blah. Well, it doesn't fall into ages specifically and perfectionally, right? That's you can do that. You can spiritualize it, but why not take it literal, like you always say anyway? So I'll set that aside for a minute. And what do I say? Even if I did believe in that, even if I did believe as I used to believe, a dispensationalist, even if I did believe that, why would I not believe we're in the last days? Well, first of all, because it's been 2,000 years. And logically, grammatically, anybody with half of an intellect knows that 1,000 years is not a day. It hasn't been 2 days. That's what they say. Here's their excuse. Well, the Bible says that 1,000 years is as a day to the Lord. Therefore, it's only been 2 days. Here's 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 some problem with that. Some basic grammar, some basic logic, some basic. Pray about it and see what the problem with saying that is. The Bible wasn't written to the Lord. The Bible was written to human beings, simple human beings. Most of us need to be simple. I need to be simple, not these intellectual giants who figured all this out. So that verse there is talking about the end of the world. When is the end of the world going to happen, right? And it says, well, everybody says it's not going to happen because it's been too long. And to God, it hasn't been too long. That's all it means. To God, it hasn't been that long. It doesn't mean that 1,000 days is a year. It's not a math problem. And it says to the Lord. Well, we're not the Lord. So for us, 1,000 years is 1,000 years. So when you say last days, it's talking about a few years, right? Almost a stretch. It could be a week, 7 real days. No, but I think it's talking about a shorter period of time, not 1,000 years, not 2,000 years. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, people. I don't mean to offend you, but that's kind of stupid. Right? I know that's a bad word. We're not supposed to use that word. Little kids say, Mommy said I'm not supposed to use that word. Uncle Dave, don't call people stupid. Okay, you're right. But it's not very bright to say that, well, it's only been a couple of days, so we're in the last days, and it's lasted for 2,000 years. Okay, so that's one argument against it. And there was a last days in the first century. Last days of what? That's the other thing. You need to ask yourself this question. Last days of what? You need to ask yourself questions. The chosen people. So Israel's the chosen for what? Right? I talk about that a lot. Chosen for what? Well, they were chosen to bring Jesus. That's all they were. That's what they were chosen for. It even said that you weren't chosen because you're good, or they weren't good. They were terrible, disgusting. They always turned away from God. They hung Jesus on the cross. Not chosen because they're amazing people. Last days of what? So there was a last days. He said the last days, and he warned people about fleeing because the temple was going to be destroyed. That whole thing in 24, Matthew 24, is talking about the end of the temple. It's sometime by the end of the world. We can get into that. Look up Steve Gregg and look up that stuff, and he does a much better job explaining it than I ever could. So last days of what? Last days of the Old Testament. Last days of the Old Covenant. Last days of the old system. The last days. In the last days. So, and when he's talking to Timothy, he says, in the last days. And who is he talking to? He's not talking to us. He's talking to Timothy. The book's written to who? Timothy. Logic, grammar, reality. It's written to Timothy. It's not written to us. Now, sometimes things that are written to them are written to us, or just the idea of it. And I would tell you this also, all the stuff it talks about in the last days, and people will be lovers of self and all, that hasn't ever stopped. That's not like oh wow, someday people are going to be lovers of themselves. Oh wow, someday people are going to have itchy ears. Oh wow, no, that happens. That's always happened. Humankind has not really changed that much. I have a good dear friend of mine who says, well, we can't really read the old guys like you do, Dave, because that was a different time and those were different people. Yes and no. People don't change. It was a different time, sure. People weren't on their phones all day and they get, everything, but people don't really change. And so, yeah, of course, the heart of it is still impactful. So there was a last days. There was a last days, and that when did that last day occur? 70 AD. There's a whole thing about that. There's a lot of information on that out there, guys, and that's real, logical. History's really good. Facts are stubborn things. History's really good. It actually happened. There's books about how the last days of Jerusalem during that time, the Israeli war with Rome and the uprising and how all that was happened and how it coincides with the book of Revelation and all this stuff happened and how people saw angels in the clouds coming and just like it's amazing. You read that book, it will blow your mind. So there's the last day, 70 80, boom, last days of the old covenant. How about, is there another last days? Yeah, there's another last days. The earth will melt with a fervent heat, right? Right? And there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. So there's the last days of what? The universe. So or some people will say it this way. My dispensational friends would say, well, if you ask them the question, they probably wouldn't know how to answer it. If I said, so last days of what? They probably go, well, this is the last days. Or, the last days of what? Last days. Last days of what? Well, we're in the last days. Last days of what? So if they really thought it through, they would probably say last days of the church. Because the church will be raptured, and that's why it's called the last days of the church. And then comes, I don't know what they call it, the tribulation. I guess is not the last days. I don't know what it is, but it's the tribulation, right? And then blah blah blah. And then people like me, they call it replacement theology. It's not replacement theology. They're the ones that have replacement theology because they want to replace the church with the 144,000. That's replacement. We don't want to replace anything. We just want to fulfill what God said. Jesus said, I've come to fulfill the law. I haven't come to replace it. I come to fulfill it. So anyway, so there is a last days coming, and here's what it is. And the last days is the end. That's what. The last days of the universe. The last days of the space-time continuum. Oh, it will last forever. It won't last forever. Even science will tell us that. What good science does, and they do some things well. Some things are their way out to lunch. They call it science. But anyway, so we are going to be in the last days of the universe, right? I think the millennium, if you go, I think is Revelation 21, 20. I always get those confused, 20, 21, 22. The last few verses of Revelation talks about the millennium, right? And then at the end of the millennium, that's when there's, Satan's loosed and there's a revolt and then everything's wiped out. And that's when I think the rapture happens, but that's just me. And me and a lot of other people, by the way. That's when the rapture happens, when Jesus comes in and we're all raptured and then everything's melted and then there's a judgment. And that's the last days. Are we in the last days now? Well, here's why I say we're not. Now it took me 15, 16 minutes to get here, but here's why I say we are not in the last days today, even if I believed in dispensationalism, because we haven't done what Jesus told us to do. Jesus said, go make disciples, go preach to all the people, go make disciples of all the nations. Now that can have several meanings. That could actually mean taking the whole world for Christ. Every nation becomes a Christian nation, and the people that aren't following God are just a minority of people. That it could mean that, right? And then there's variations on that all the way down to the very least that it means is that every nation, when it says nation by it doesn't mean nations like United States, Russia, Japan, doesn't mean nations like that. It means peoples, people groups, tribes, different types of people. Like in China, there's hundreds of different people groups. In the Philippines, there's lots of different people groups. In the U.S., there's different people groups. It says disciples of all the people groups. So I think at the very least that means in every people group there's people that follow Jesus. And there's what we call the unreached people. And if you look it up, some people say 2 billion, some people say 3 billion people. I say 2 billion people are unreached at this point. In other words, they have no gospel, they have no churches, they have no Christians. So they're unreached people. And most of them are in China and India. Half of them are in India. Half of them. 1 billion people are unreached. They have nothing. So are we in the last days of the universe? Are we in that last days when the world has been taken in that way? Like there's at least disciples in all the nations. Let's just go with that as a bare minimum. I think it might be a little more. I'm somewhere between there's disciples in all the nations and all the nations are Christian. I'm somewhere between that, what it means, take the word for Christ. Are we even close to that? No, we haven't been close to it. If you look it up in the history of, you look it up what's it called, missionary evangelical movements in the 20th century and the 19th century and up to today, and you'll find that in the early 20th, the late 19th century, early 20th, there was this huge. It went from like 20% to 40 some percent, 60% of the world, 75% of the world has been reached. So it went up great, and then it just stops, and it's stuck at this for like over 100 years. It's stuck at this, right? The devil's fighting hard to keep this world. I'm going to keep this world. And God says, no, you're not. But I don't know the timing of it. Nobody does. But I'll tell you what, until we get a little closer to that. Now, when will I say we're in the last days? Not that I'm the authority. You believe what you want to believe. When will I say we're in the last days? When I start seeing thousands of missionaries going to those places, then I'll say, yep, we're in the last days. But what? As soon as I see people becoming, as soon as I see the gospel being spread to those places that are unreached, then I say, yep, we're obviously in the last days now. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us? What does that practically mean? Why do I say it's necessary? Because I've had many people. I've had some people tell me, well, you can't be right. We can't take the world for Christ. That's not going to happen because things are too bad. Don't you understand how this works in the end times? Things. Look at the world right now. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. Israel's always under attack, and this is it. It's the end. This is the end times, and we're going to be raptured soon. This is the end. There's no way it's going to get better. There's no way we're going to take the world for Christ. So here's the problem. Jesus said to do it. Go and make disciples of all the nations. But then those people, a lot of evangelicals, supposedly, those people, the dispensationalists, a lot of them are now saying, no, we're not going to take the world for Christ. We're just going to wait for the end. We're not going to obey the Lord. Some people say, oh yeah, they give lip service. We're going to do it, but in their heart, they don't want to do it. They're not going to do it. Someone else is going to do it. Who's going to do it? Well, I don't know. Churches in the U.S. don't send people out like that anymore. Very rare, very rare. So we're not doing it. So that's why I think it has to flip. I think it has to be where almost everybody that says they're a Christian says, I'm going to go out, or I'm going to send somebody out, or I'm going to make sure I'm going to call Dave Pinson, I'm going to ask him what I can do to help. I'm just saying that because I could use help. But anybody who's trying to make disciples of Jesus Christ anywhere in the world, including in your hometown, including in your church, maybe even, I'm going to help them. I'm going to join in the fight. I'm going to obey the Lord. Jesus said, if you love me, you do what I say. So let's get in those last days, guys. Huh? Or you don't have to. You could just say, no, this guy's crazy. This crazy old white man in the Philippines. What is, anyway. So that's our hope, that we take this world for Christ. And I'm standing on it. I'll die on it if I have to. And it doesn't matter because I won't ever die. God bless you guys. Ta-ta for now.